In Alaska, floodings in Mendenhall River wash one large home.
Authorities advise residents in the area to keep away from the river. More details on this later in the news. Good evening, I am Gianna Llanes.
And I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. Marcos administration eyes a 31 billion peso reserve for 2024 calamity fund. House Speaker Martin Romualdez outlines the Philippine economic roadmap at the ASEAN Assembly. Gustavo Petro's first office year is subject to mixed reviews. Donald Trump argues the proposed limits for his 2020 election case. And NBA star Jordan Clarkson joins Gilas Pilipinas for FIBA World Cup. The Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, is set to launch mall voting for easier and more convenient voting for the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections, or BSKE. COMELEC emphasizes the advantages of holding BSKE votings inside malls, not just as a convenience for the disabled, the elderly, and others, but also for the structure and organization it would provide. COMELEC chairperson George Erwin Garcia also expects to see fewer vote buying inside the malls, and if all goes as planned, COMELEC is seeking to utilize mall voting nationwide for the 2025 BSKE.
The Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, discusses its Labor and Employment Plan, or LEP 2023 to 2028, a framework that aims to achieve the future of enhanced labor, with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in attendance. The LEP will include 3 focal areas to function as the labor framework in accordance with the Marcos administration's socio-economic agenda, such as increasing employment opportunities and ensuring labor standards, among others. DOLE Secretary Bienvenido Leguesma proposes a tripartite oversight committee to monitor the implementation of the LEP. The president instructs DOLE to continue developing the framework that will help Filipino workers with proper training and skills for the local and international market.
The Commission on Higher Education, or CHED, chairperson Prospero de Vera III encourages the inclusion of ASEAN languages like Thai and Vietnamese in higher education institutions, or HEIs, in the Philippines. De Vera aims to solidify a regional unity with the use of Southeast Asian language in competitions like songwriting or poetry. He also expects that such action would create a movement among other ASEAN member states to adopt the same plans, ultimately promoting the Filipino language in other countries.
The Marcos administration is asking Congress to invest 31 billion pesos in reserve for a 2024 calamity fund, higher than the 20.5 billion pesos in 2023. 17.949 billion pesos will be used for aid, relief, and rehabilitation services to areas affected by natural or man-made calamities, while 13.051 billion would be for the reconstruction of permanent structures. The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council proposes a separate 7.425 billion worth of quick response fund allocated to 9 other government agencies. Republic Act 11936 also stipulates a local government support fund for local government units.
House Speaker Martin Romualdez underscores the Philippines' economic roadmap at the 44th ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly. Vin Pascua reports.
The Philippines shares its economic roadmap through the presentation of House Speaker Martin Romualdez in Jakarta, Indonesia. Speaker Romualdez prompts fellow ASEAN Solons to grasp the occasion as a medium not only for dialogue but also to share best practices among member parliaments. At the plenary session, Romualdez shares the medium-term fiscal strategy that the Marcos administration adopted to support economic recovery in the country. He adds that the executive branch spearheaded initiatives focused on creating more job opportunities for Filipinos, as well as improving their employability. The House Speaker also shares that under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s leadership, the House of Representatives passed 33 out of 42 priority measures by the end of the first regular session. This emphasizes the swift but thorough passage of the Chief Executive's legislative agenda. Among other measures approved, Romualdez cites the approval of the Maharlika Investment Fund Bill. Romualdez adds that the Assembly provides an effective medium for dialogue on interparliamentary concerns and diplomacy firm on equal partnership and mutual respect and benefit. Vin Pascua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. reassures the armed forces of the Philippines and the rest of the Army his administration's support in modernizing their equipment and training. Madeline Villar Moratilio tells us more.
It is with a good deal of pride that I preside over the Philippine Army Change of Command ceremony. We congratulate then Army Commanding General, now AFP Chief of Staff, General Romeo Browner Jr., for completing your tour of duty and developing the Army into the progressive and resilient force that it is today.
After praising the new AFP Chief of Staff, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. congratulates the new Philippine Army Chief, Lieutenant General Roy Galido, and urges him to transform the Army into a world-class defense force. The President also relays his expectations that Galido will finally end the insurgency and terrorist threat to the nation. He ends his speech at the Philippine Army Change of Command ceremony with a guarantee that the Marcos administration will continue to support the modernization of the Army.
As your President and Commander-in-Chief, I assure you that this administration is committed to supporting you by modernizing the Army and the armed forces of the Philippines. Hand in hand, we will work together to heighten the internal and external security of the Philippines, to create a more conducive environment for the comprehensive growth and empowerment of our people.
Madeline Villar Moratilio for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri calls for a boycott of all Chinese companies and its products as protest against its continued harassment in Philippine waters. This after the Chinese Coast Guard's water attack on the Philippine vessel en route to Ayungin Shoal amid resupply missions. Zubiri suggests that the country should start looking for other trading partners instead of relying on China. He notes that the Philippines may revive its free trade agreements with countries like the United States, Australia, New Zealand, the European Union, and the Southeast Asian nations.
Beijing claims that Philippines vowed to tow away BRP Sierra Madre at the Ayungin Shoal. JD Mahinay reports.
China's foreign ministry says that the Philippines made a promise to remove BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal, noting that Manila has yet to act on it. It also asserts that Ayungin Shoal or Ren Aizhao has always been a part of China's Nansha Chundao. The Chinese Foreign Ministry adds that in the year 1999, the Philippines sent a military vessel and deliberately ran it aground the coast of Ren Aizhao. This was an attempt to change the status quo of the reef illegally. The ministry emphasizes that the Philippines has vowed several times to tow away the vessel, but has yet to act on it. The China's Foreign Ministry also addresses the recent water cannoning of its Coast Guard at Philippine Coast Guard or PCG vessels in the West Philippine Sea last August 5. Beijing asserts that the incident occurred due to PCG's vessel ignoring China's repeated warnings. Meanwhile, the National Security Council Assistant Director General Jonathan Malaya says that the country has not and will never enter in any pact abandoning its sovereign rights and jurisdiction over Philippine waters. Ayungin Shoal is about 194 kilometers of Palawan province, standing within the country's exclusive economic zone. JD Mahinay reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Coming up, like a strong marriage, Russia and China renew their vows. Gustavo Petro's first year as Colombia's head is marred with mixed reviews. And President Donald Trump seeks new parameters for his proceedings. Stay tuned for more stories around the globe when we return.
This portion.
Sa panahon ng kalamidad, sakuna at trahedya, maraming grupo at individual na lumalabas para tumulong sa kapwa. Kaya kung kayo po ay may kilala, nakakaiba at natatangi ang ginagawang pagresponde sa lipunan, mag-text sa 0915-415-1035 o mag-email sa responde@net25.com. Pwede rin kayo magpadala na mensahe sa ating pong Facebook page at Net25 TV. Panahon na para kilalanin natin ang ating mga certified e-responder. Sabado, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi. Dito lamang sa Net25.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. 2 Russian missiles hit the Ukrainian town of Pokrovsk, killing 7 people and injuring dozens more. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claims that the missile struck an ordinary residential building, though 19 officers were killed in the blast. 31 people have so far been tallied among the wounded. Search and rescue operations are ongoing.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov have reconfirmed that their countries will continue working closely together. After the 2 leaders talked over the phone on Monday, China's foreign ministry said that the value of trade between the 2 countries has reached a record high and energy cooperation is steadily growing. Wang said that China will continue to uphold an impartial position on any international multilateral occasion, in an apparent reference to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Lavrov, meanwhile, has welcomed China's constructive role in the issue. The 2 also agreed that Russia and China would reject any Western attempt to contain their development through sanctions.
Meanwhile, Russia has doubled its estimate for 2023 defense spending plan as the war in Ukraine drags on. Reports say that Russia's estimated annual spending now stands at 9.7 trillion rubles, or more than $100 billion, a third of all their public expenditures. Funding for schools, hospitals, and roads have been diminished as a result. Experts say Russia has seen its military spending soar as the invasion drags on. The U.S. Treasury Department believes that Russia's revenue from oil exports has decreased since the group of 7 nations and allies imposed a price cap on Russian crude. Russian President Vladimir Putin, meanwhile, signed a law introducing a windfall tax on excess profits of Russian companies. The tax will be due on January 28 next year, but a discount tax rate of 5% will be applied to those that pay before November 30.
Jailed Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko on hunger strike was admitted to hospital in Dakar Sunday. He started his starvation protest shortly after his arrest last month. EJ Gonzalez reports.
Ousmane Sonko's party PASTEF says he had been admitted for emergency care. This was confirmed by 2 spokesmen and his lawyer, Sire Cledor Lee. PASTEF says the authorities are responsible for Sonko's condition. There has been no statement from the authorities on the matter. 49-year-old Sonko started his hunger strike on July 30. This was 2 days after he was arrested. A declared candidate for the February 2024 presidential election, Sonko has been engaged in a bitter power struggle with the authorities since 2021. This was when he was placed under investigation in a moral corruption case. On June 1, Sonko was sentenced in absentia to 2 months in prison. He and his supporters denounced the conviction as politically motivated. That conviction sparked clashes, leaving 16 dead according to the government, 24 according to Amnesty International, and 30 according to Sonko's PASTEF party. Late in July, he was arrested. On Monday, he was charged with fomenting insurrection and his party dissolved, setting off more protests in which 2 people were killed. EJ Gonzalez in Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Authorities of the National Electoral Council of Ecuador, or CNE, have received death threats in the middle of the process for general elections set for August 20. Electoral Council President Diana Atamant said that she personally has not received any, but denounces the practice nonetheless.
Hemos tenido agresiones de tipo que se caracterizan como violencia política por personas que no se identifican e incluso sí por personas también que se identifican. En lo personal no he recibido de amenazas de muerte, esperamos que eso no suceda, pero no podría decir lo mismo de otros consejeros que sí lo han recibido.
In recent years, Ecuador has faced an onslaught of violence linked to drug trafficking, which has also been overshadowed by several notable high-profile attacks. This campaign period alone includes the death of a mayor and a deputy candidate and several threats levied against presidential candidates. Atamant also stressed that public officials are exposed to the paranoia of threats and political violence, not only in public but also online.
Lamentablemente estamos expuestos a esas circunstancias de no solamente recibir amenazas, sino violencia política contra la mayoría de los consejeros, ya sea por redes sociales, por nuestros números de celular, a través del aplicativo WhatsApp, a través de mensajes de texto que nos llegan.
Crime in the country has increased as the homicide rate rose to 25 deaths per 1,000 inhabitants. Analysts say that they could rise to as much as 40 per 100,000 within the year.
Así es, cuando se avecina ya, estamos a puertas del día de las elecciones, la violencia se torna, al menos en redes, se torna mucho más agresiva y no es la primera vez que esto sucede. Sin embargo, nosotros seguiremos trabajando sin temor a nada, garantizando transparente y cumpliendo con nuestro deber constitucional.
Brazil's count of its indigenous population rose by 89% from 2010 to 2022. This is a jump to nearly 1.7 million people. The rapid growth was attributed partly to new methodology. Rose Papaangelis has more details.
Under the new count, indigenous people make up 0.83% of the South American country's total population of 203 million. The National Statistics Institute, IBGE, says this is up from 0.47% at the previous census. IBGE notes, however, limits in comparing the 2010 and 2022 indigenous figures. It had sent census takers to more indigenous reservation and used a new methodology asking people in all native communities if they self-identified as indigenous. Brazil's overall population grew by 6.5% from 2010 to 2022 to 203.1 million. IBGE says the country's more than 700 indigenous reservations are home to 689,000 people. The Yanomami Reservation in the Amazon rainforest has 27,000 inhabitants. It is the largest reservation in the country. The figures come as a divisive debate rages in Brazil over indigenous lands. The Supreme Court is currently hearing a so-called trial of the century over whether new indigenous reservations can be created on land where native communities were not present in 1988, when Brazil's current constitution was ratified. Rosa Angeles from Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Colombia is in a rough divide 1 year into Gustavo Petro's presidency, with its successes overshadowed by corruption scandals and persistent insecurity.
Hemos llevado a varios escenarios internacionales, desde la Conferencia de las Naciones Unidas sobre Cambio Climático hasta la Cumbre para un Nuevo Pacto Financiero Mundial, la propuesta de canje de deuda por acción climática.
When Petro came to power, he vowed to shake up the country that was long under conservative rule. His predecessor's term was hounded by massive social inequality and decades of armed conflict with armed groups and drug traffickers. He launched an ambitious plan to negotiate with a variety of armed groups in his quest for total peace, signing various ceasefires, not all of them withstanding the test of time. Petro arrived with extremely high expectations and a 62% favorability rating to match. People imagined that everything was going to change, but now their disappointment runs deep, with his popularity index dropping to just 34%.
El gobierno del cambio escogió la vida. El gobierno del cambio está empeñado en convertir a Colombia en potencia mundial de la vida.
One area where he has made gains is in tackling the country's historic battle with unequal land distribution, with Colombia's main rebel groups initially formed to fight for land rights. Petro's government says it has already given title deeds for more than 1 million hectares of land to farmers in his first year, compared to the 1.4 million hectares given out by his conservative predecessor, Ivan Duque, over a 4-year term.
No es expropiado a nada ni a nadie. Estamos comprando la tierra, formalizándola, dándosela a quienes verdaderamente quieren trabajarla.
Peru's President Dina Boluarte headed to the Brazilian city of Belém for the Amazon Summit, marking her first trip abroad. She will head the delegation that will participate in the Amazon Regional Summit, where goals to preserve the largest tropical forest will be affirmed and evaluated. The trip sparked controversy in Peru because Boluarte was able to travel thanks to a law passed by Congress that authorizes her to govern remotely in the absence of a vice president, a position that has been left vacant since she rose to power. Boluarte was vice president until she replaced Pedro Castillo, who was ousted after his unsuccessful attempt to dissolve Congress for a constituent assembly. In Belém, Boluarte met with Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva for initial talks regarding the summit's agenda. The Amazon Summit will bring together the 8 member countries of the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, or ACTO, to preserve the rainforest.
In Cuba, Havana residents react to a set of rules issued by the country's central bank banning state and private businesses from using ATMs and limiting cash transactions between them. This as the island struggles with an inflationary spiral and a severe liquidity crisis. David Oria reports.
New Cuban regulations are limiting cash transactions to 5,000 pesos or $208. Residents are now hesitant to put money in the bank. They say this because if they need it at the moment, banks will not be able to give it to them. They will have to wait 3 days or until the bank has enough money. Those without smartphones say it is hard for them to make transfers. The withdrawal of cash from the island's ATMs has become a headache for Cubans over the last 2 months. Depositors have to wait in long lines at the few stations that have money, and, if they can, they must settle for low-denomination banknotes. Some say being able to withdraw only 5,000 pesos at a time is a challenge. They would need to stand in line for 3 hours at a time per transaction. If they need to withdraw more than 5,000, they need to go to another bank and stand in line for another 3 hours. Central Bank Vice President Alberto Quiñones says the measure seeks that the relationship of collections and payments between the actors of the economy, whether private or not, is not based on cash, but on electronic commerce. The central bank's announcement also coincides with record prices of the dollar and the euro in the informal market, which governs the street economy on the island. David Oria from Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The United Kingdom's government transfers 15 asylum seekers onto a barge in southern England to cut costs for sheltering individuals seeking refuge in the country. A refugee charity group calls it an inhumane act of housing people in a floating quasi-prison, especially with the traumatic experiences that the asylum seekers have gone through. Other immigrants' rights groups are also opposed to the act. The floating hostel will accommodate up to 500 men after the 15 that first arrived.
Former President Donald Trump's attorneys filed court documents arguing for fewer restrictions over evidence in his 2020 election case. Their main argument was that this was a trial that tested one's control over First Amendment rights. Trump's team asked the court to narrow the proposed order to shield genuinely sensitive materials from public view. His legal team argued that doing so would go against established law and violate Trump's First Amendment rights. They further argued that the administration's primary political opponents during election season could weaponize the discoveries and utilize the media in order to broadcast the downfall of their client.
Well, thank you very much. This is a very sad day for America. And it was also very sad driving through Washington, D.C. and seeing the filth and the decay and all of the broken buildings and walls and the graffiti. This is not the place that I left. It's a very sad thing to see it. When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America. This is the persecution of the person that's leading by very, very substantial numbers in the Republican primary and leading Biden by a lot. So if you can't beat him, you persecute him or you prosecute him. We can't let this happen in America. Thank you very much.
Special counsel Jack Smith responded promptly to Trump's legal team's request, saying that the government has proposed a standard flow that will streamline the court proceedings and that would preserve the integrity of everyone involved. He says that the former president's proposal constitutes an unreasonable request in order to facilitate this plan regarding this case in the media. Further expounding that if they cannot find a win in the court of law, then they would try to find a win in the court of public opinion.
Adherence to the rule of law is a bedrock principle of the Department of Justice. And our nation's commitment to the rule of law sets an example for the world. We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone.
The United States welcomes China's participation in Saudi-led talks on the war in Ukraine. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller says the U.S. believes it was productive that China attended. Ken Cruz tells us more.
U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller says it would be productive for China to play a role in ending the war in Ukraine if it was willing to play a role that respected Ukraine's territorial integrity and Ukraine's sovereignty.
We believe it's helpful for countries to attend and hear directly from Ukraine.
The talk Saturday in the Saudi port city of Jeddah included some 40 countries. Participating countries included emerging powers such as India and Brazil that have been uneasy about Western efforts to punish Russia. But Saudi Arabia also drew in top officials from the U.S. as well as Ukraine itself, which sought to rally support. President Joe Biden's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, and Acting Deputy Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, also met separately in Jeddah with Chinese envoy Li Hui. China has been Russia's key international ally, but has also stepped up diplomacy with Ukraine. It has stopped short of full-fledged military support from Moscow. In Washington, D.C., Ken Cruz from Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Up next, YouTube streamer Kai Cenat faces charges for inciting a riot in New York City. A brawl on the docks of Alabama almost turns into a race war. And leaders gather in Brazil for Lula da Silva's Amazon Summit. Please don't go away. We've got more stories from around the globe when Matanang Agila International returns.
Aaksyon sa lahat ng problema. Walang uurungang reklamo. Re-responde anumang sitwasyon. Kung kayo po ay may sumbong, mag-text lamang po sa 0915-415-1035. Mag-email din sa responde@net25.com. Pwede rin kayo magpadala ng inyong po mensahe sa ating pong Facebook page at Net25TV. Walang imposible at lahat may solusyon sa mga totoong certified e-responder.
Of streaming platforms provided a significant shift to viewing habits that challenged the traditional way we watch films and television. And there are people who possess the creative genius and business acumen to take advantage of the paradigm shift. Writer, creative consultant, director, and producer Benedict Miki is one and the visionary behind the production company Lone Wolf Films Incorporated. Learn the business of storytelling from the director's chair here at Open for Business.
Natawa sila, kinilig sila, naiyak sila, giving people these emotions. That's what a filmmaker strives for and dreams of.
Open for Business with Cesar Vallejos, Sunday, 9 p.m.
In Vietnam, after months of prolonged heat waves and drought, heavy downpours in August have damaged hundreds of homes, destroyed crops, and left people dead. Jeff Sanidad reports.
Flash floods and landslides are wreaking havoc in Muang Khai in Vietnam. Hundreds of homes and crops have been destroyed by endless rain. Roads are damaged. Residents hold on to ropes, trying to cross roads safely. Local officials help rescue those entrapped by the flooding. Powerful waters sweep whatever is on its way. 8 people have been reported dead. 2 were children. Vietnam has been enduring months of drought and record high temperatures, and now this deadly flood. Scientists warn weather extremes have been intensified due to global warming. Jeff Sanidad for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
In Alaska, record floodings caused houses to drift into the Mendenhall River. Local officials issue an emergency declaration as a glacial outburst flooding from the Suicide Basin caused the torrent. Local weather service says the Mendenhall Lake and River crested at a record 14.97 feet, far higher than the previous 11.99 feet in 2016. Authorities advise residents to stay away from the river.
A runaway tire from a Chevrolet Silverado launches an SUV into the air, creating a scene reminiscent of an action-packed movie. You can see a tire dislodge from a pickup truck, which launches the subcompact SUV into the air, with its roof subsequently slamming down on the road. According to the owner of the footage, the driver of the SUV was able to walk away relatively unharmed. The SUV model is known for earning a top safety pick rating from the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety, built to take that kind of crash.
A car found itself in a second-floor bedroom in Decatur Township, Pennsylvania. Images show a Toyota Corolla dangling off a roof and a massive hole in the top corner of the house when the car was removed. Officials with the Junction Fire Company responded to the scene, where they stabilized the building so that the extraction would not cause a collapse. They added that the car likely hit a small culvert next to the home's driveway, which launched it through the air. No one inside the house was harmed during the incident. State troopers reported that it was determined through an investigation that the crash was an intentional act and charges were still pending.
Social media influencer Kai Cenat faces criminal charges after his giveaway event in New York City turned into a brawl and a riot. At least 2,000 people gathered and surrounded the streets in anticipation of free game consoles from the popular streamer, hurling bottles, stones, and cans of paint. Video footage shows them surrounding an SUV believed to be transporting the social media influencer. Kai Cenat is charged with 2 counts of inciting a riot and unlawful assembly and was taken into custody during the riot. He has since been released but will appear in court on the 18th of August.
U.S. authorities issue arrest warrants for the individuals involved in the large brawl on a riverboat dock. Video footage shows white boaters ganging up on a Black Harbor employee, and the fight escalated as more people joined in, dividing the groups between Caucasian and dark-skinned individuals. 4 warrants of arrest have been processed, with more to be issued after a police review of more additional video footage. The local police department have already detained several of the investigators, with the local city mayor promising justice against them.
A 7-year-old boy passed away only minutes after playing in a limestone mound in Ipiranga, Parana, in the south region of Brazil. The tragic final photo of the 7-year-old boy shows him giving a double thumbs up while sitting on a pile of limestone sand, a common material used for construction and agriculture. The family of the child claimed they were unaware of the risks of exposure to the pulverized stone, and local police launched an investigation into the boy's death. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, silicosis causes inflammation and scarring as the particles get trapped in the lung tissue. This reduces the ability of the lungs to take in oxygen, and the condition often leads to permanent lung damage and could be fatal. CDC adds that although chronic silicosis occurs after 10 years of exposure, the disease can take over much more quickly due to heavy exposure.
2 helicopters collided mid-air while battling a wildfire in Southern California Sunday. One landed safely, the other crashed, killing all 3 people on board, Ralph Coronel reports.
The 2 helicopters were among 6 aircraft sent to help fight a fire in the community of Cabazon, California. The blaze started as a structure fire but quickly became a vegetation fire that was burning about 3 acres or 1.2 hectares.
Surrounding city officials say that authorities had demolished more than 46,000 unauthorized buildings for 2 years.
The leaders of 8 Amazon rainforest nations will meet in Brazil to tackle pressing challenges facing the critical ecosystem. Representatives from Brazil, Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Peru, Suriname, and Venezuela will join the two-day meeting of the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, or ACTO, which kicks off on Tuesday in the northern Brazilian city of Belém. It is a 28-year-old organization's first summit since 2009, as Lula seeks to deliver on his pledge that Brazil is back in the fight against climate change. Leaders are due to discuss strategies to fight deforestation and organized crime and seek sustainable development for the region, home to 50 million people, including hundreds of indigenous groups. With its hundreds of billions of carbon-absorbing trees, the Amazon is a key buffer against global warming. But scientists warn deforestation is pushing it dangerously close to a tipping point, beyond which trees would die off and release their carbon stores back into the atmosphere, with catastrophic consequences for the climate. According to the latest figures from Brazil's National Space Agency, carbon emissions from the Amazon are already increased by 117% in 2020 compared to the annual average for 2010 to 2018.
Environmental experts are wary about Scotland's gradual climate change, saying residents must prepare for water scarcity. From Edinburgh, United Kingdom, Hilary Mendoza has the details.
Another prolonged dry spell earlier this year has heightened fears of a different kind. The drier than usual start to 2023, alongside other gradual climate shifts, has implications for everything from native wildlife and species, including Scotland's famous salmon population, to farming and power production. Figures released by the Scottish Environment Protection Agency confirmed what seasoned observers could already see. Loch Ness's freshwaters, Scotland's largest by volume, had dropped to the lowest level in decades. It had not been this shallow, with a depth of around 109 centimeters at a hydroelectric dam halfway along its eastern shore since the early 1990s. According to locals, demand for water in summer is also intensifying, with more competition among farmers, fishermen, and hydroelectric firms. Environmental experts warn residents and businesses to adapt to the changing weather patterns and prepare for periods of water scarcity and floods as the average temperature rises. Reporting from Edinburgh, United Kingdom, I am Hilary Mendoza from Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Coming right up, Russia to launch its first lunar mission in nearly 50 years. Gilas Pilipinas gets some much-needed breathing room as Utah Jazz star Jordan Clarkson arrives in Manila. And BTS star Suga is set to undergo mandatory military service. Catch the latest in business, sports, tech, and entertainment. Mata ng Agila International will be back.
Ako po ang katuwang ninyo para mas maunawaan ang usaping ito. Pag-usapan natin 8 Bulaga. Dumating din si Mr. Tobiera, si Tony Tobiera. At doon, inisip niya na i-offer sa amin ang isang noontime program.
So, in short, natanggap namin si Tobiera. Nagkaroon na ng show. May 8 Bulaga na.
Matagal nang sinasabi na ginagawa dapat ng DPWH yan. Nabawasan na ba ang kalidad ng mga programa at pelikulang gawa ng Pinoy? Sa tingin mo ba, mas okay bang negosyo na lang kaysa mamasukan? Check tayo dyan. Check tayo dyan. Check tayo dyan. Mag-reality check tayo.
Hoy, congrats to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bago mong show, bago mong bahay, Net 25, the best.
Aba, siyempre, hindi ako pwedeng humiwalay sa inyo.
Mahihit.
Si Aramina may dance challenge na magpapaganda sa araw mo. Magandang Araw Dance Challenge. Kitang-kita nga naman bakit gaganda ang araw mo. Kaya sali na sa Magandang Araw Dance Challenge sa TikTok. Magandang araw mula sa Net25.
Lagi mong kasama. Magandang araw, magandang araw.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. Saudi Arabia is set to raise almost all of its oil prices for Asia and Europe for September. This is due to supply constraints and rising demand tightening the crude oil market. Saudi's Aramco will implement the price increase of Arab light crude oil for sale to Asian countries by about 30 cents to $3.50 per barrel above the benchmark. Aramco sells about 60% of its crude oil to Asia. It is mostly under long-term contracts in which prices are negotiated monthly. Countries such as China, Japan, South Korea, and India are Aramco's biggest buyers. Meanwhile, the price of Arab light crude in the Mediterranean will increase by $1 to $4.50 per barrel. Northwest Europe, however, is expected to pay an increase of $2 to a $5.80 premium to benchmark for ICE Brent. All prices for the United States remain unchanged for September. YouTube star Mr. Beast is being sued by his own burger company, Virtual Dining Concepts, or VDC, for $100 million over breach of contract and defamation charges. VDC alleged that Mr. Beast or Jimmy Donaldson in real life did not deliver on his contractual obligations and made untruthful statements hurting their brand in the process. VDC added that Donaldson's actions have caused financial harm and destroyed the restaurant's reputation. The legal fight over Mr. Beast Burger began last week when Donaldson sued VDC to try to get out of their business relationship. His suit alleged quality control issues that VDC ignored, causing inedible food that's hurt the Mr. Beast reputation. Attorneys for Donaldson and Beast Investments have yet to respond for comments. Donaldson opened Mr. Beast Burger in December 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic in partnership with VDC after signing an agreement for a 4-year partnership, where it was named the fastest growing restaurant brand in the country by Forbes, which grew to have 1,700 virtual locations in 2022. Virgin Galactic unveils its second commercial spaceflight crew. Dubbed as Galactic 02, the mission starts with the advertised price of $450,000. Among the crew is the second youngest person to go to space, Anastasia Mayers. The 18-year-old girl would be accompanied by her mother, Keisha Shahaf. The two got their seats on the rocket after winning a place in a prize draw organized by the space company. Last June, the Galactic 01 mission successfully flew at an altitude of 279,000 feet or 85 kilometers above ground. In the United Kingdom, university researchers unveils a new method of hacking through artificial intelligence wires used to steal data from keyboard keystrokes. According to researchers, the AI can listen to the keyboard to understand what is being typed, noting that it can take sensitive information such as passwords and bank account details. The researchers add that the AI has achieved a 95% accuracy from smartphone readings, 93% from Zoom meetings, and 91.7% from Skype. The method is effective against individuals who use mechanical keyboards. However, silent keyboards are still not safe as the AI also works on membrane-based keyboards. Meanwhile, researchers note that touch typing reduces its accuracy to a range of about 40 to 64%. Russia plans to launch a lunar lander this week. The Russian space agency Roscosmos announced the scheduled launch of Luna 25 lander to be held on August 11. The space agency adds that the lunar lander is tasked to take and analyze soil samples as well as conduct long-term scientific research. The four-legged lander weighs around 800 kilograms, is expected to descend in the southern pole region of the Earth's moon. Russia's first lunar mission was in 1976, almost 47 years ago.
NBA star Jordan Clarkson has arrived in Manila to boost Gilas Pilipinas as its naturalized player for the 2023 FIBA World Cup co-hosted by the country. The rest of the Gilas contingent, led by head coach Chot Reyes, were to return to Manila from China after a successful stint in the Huiyan WUS International Basketball Tournament. Clarkson is set to be on the cutting edge of Gilas once the global meet unfurls on August 25, as he will lead the team to claim an outright spot in the 2024 Paris Olympics as the highest-ranked Asian team in the World Cup. Clarkson's first stint with Gilas was during the Asian Games in Indonesia back in 2018, while his most recent stint was at the World Cup Asian qualifiers last year. Gilas Pilipinas is bunched with the Dominican Republic, Angola, and Italy in Group A of the showcase that will also serve as a qualifying tournament for the Paris Olympics next year. On Monday, American director William Friedkin has died at the age of 87. According to a family friend, Friedkin passed away in Los Angeles after suffering unspecified health issues in recent years. Friedkin is survived by his wife, Sherry Lansing, and two sons. Friedkin was among a crop of influential young new Hollywood directors in the 1970s who fundamentally reshaped the U.S. film industry. He continued directing into his 80s, where his final film, The Caine Mutiny Court Martial, is set to premiere at this year's Venice Film Festival. Tributes, meanwhile, have poured for Friedkin as Oscar-winning director Guillermo del Toro called him as one of the gods of cinema. K-pop idol group Tomorrow X Together, or TXT, will hold its Sweet Mirage tour in the world's largest indoor arena, the Philippine Arena at Ciudad de Victoria, Bocaue, Bulacan, this August 13. The award-winning boy group consists of talented members Yoonjun, Soobin, Byung-gil, Huning Kai, and Taehyun. They debuted under the Big Hit Entertainment in 2019. This concert will mark one of the fourth-generation K-pop groups and the third K-pop act to hold a concert in the Philippine Arena. The act Sweet Mirage tour of the group sets to be the last tour stop, and they expect that the Filipino fans, or MOAs, will get emotional with their performance. Philo MOAs awaits this concert to celebrate Huning Kai's birthday the day after the concert. Concert and TXT shuttle bus tickets en route to the Philippine Arena are still available. Just visit the SM Ticket website, smtickets.com. BTS star Suga prepares for military service as the third member of the group to enlist. Hybe Entertainment Company announced that BTS Suga has opted to proceed with his enlistment in the South Korean military. They asked to give continuous support and love for Suga until he completes the service. In South Korea, all men at least 18 years old and above are required to serve for 18 to 20 months in military. BTS has undergone a year-long debate whether they would be granted exemption. Last year, Jin, the oldest member of the group, went ahead and enlisted to South Korea's mandatory military service program, followed by his co-member J-Hope in April. Chairperson of Hybe Corporation Bang Si-hyuk said earlier this year that BTS military service will slow the global growth of K-pop.
Light news indeed. Hong Kong once again revisits the past through its neon sign exhibits. Dozens of previously removed neon shop signs in Hong Kong are restored and lit again at the exhibit curated by Tetra Neon Exchange, a group conserving the city's neon signs. According to the group, the exhibit promotes awareness to preserve the vintage signs. The exhibit is held at Hong Kong's Type 1, a police compound converted into a cultural center, and is expected to run until September the 3rd. And for your Tuesday motivation, here's a quote from Roman philosopher and statesman Seneca the Younger. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials.
This is really encouraging because when we're going through our different challenges throughout this week, we can be reminded that's really part of our story and our growth and becoming that gem.
Just like it has been said that pressure makes the diamond. Just
Yes.
imagine without any of our struggles, all the difficulties that we're facing, what would we be?
Exactly. It's all part of the process, part of our journeys. And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am Gianna Llanes.
I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.